This is lesson 4.4, and we're going to be talking about completing the square. On the right-hand side, it shows what completing the square actually is, which is how you convert from one form of a quadratic function into another, specifically from standard form into vertex form. And so each of the forms tells you something specific about the parabola. So in standard form, this last number is going to be your y-intercept for the parabola. Whereas in vertex form, you can see your h and your k, which is your vertex for the parabola. But if you looked at the standard form, you couldn't really see your vertex. And so sometimes it's beneficial to be able to convert from one form algebraically into the other. It gives you more pieces of information so that you can graph the parabola. So no matter which form it's in, they should both graph the exact same parabola. Now this first page goes over, I guess, a buildup of completing the square, but we kind of already talked about what it is, and I'm going to skip ahead to the steps. Now these steps are my colleague's steps, and I know that other people do it this way too. I actually don't, but they're very similar and you'll get the same answer. So if you'd like to go through the steps yourself and read them and try them out, then that's great. I'm going to actually show you my way of doing it. And again, the same answer either way. Okay, so notice that number 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all in standard form. You don't see any brackets. I mean, you kind of do for the last one, but that's because I already did it for you. Okay, but I figured if we went through 3 of them together, you kind of would get an idea of how to tackle these questions. Okay, so we're going to try to convert them into vertex form. Now, before I actually get into it, I just want you to get an idea of what's happening. Again, we're going to use a process called completing the square, and we want it to look like vertex form. But notice that in vertex form, you must have 2 identical brackets because you have to put a squared for your final answer. Now, I know a lot of you will jump right away into factoring it, and 2 numbers that multiply to 5 add to 6 are going to be 1 and 5. Now, that's fine, and that would be something called factored form. So it's a different form, but it's not the desired vertex form because neither of these are actually identical to each other. And so there's no way I can write them with a little 2 because they're not the same. So we're going to have to do this a little bit differently than just flat out factoring. Okay, we have to create identical brackets. All right, so let's go through a series of steps, and I actually kind of make up like some weird steps and a strange scenario in my head, but it always helps me to remember. So this is my party scenario. Okay, so first of all, you're going to highlight the 2 terms that have X's, not the one that doesn't have an X, like that 5. Leave it alone. I don't want that. Create a house for your party. Okay, so notice right now, only x squared and 6x are in the party. 5 is, I don't know, in the backyard. Okay, and the y equals 2 is, I don't know, the person in the front of the house that's just greeting people, whatever. Write your house a little bit bigger. So we're going to just make sure that we still have the same people inside the house. We haven't really done anything with the guy in the backyard. He's out there. Okay, and then in the front. And so I have exactly the same thing that I wrote at the top, right? Nothing's changed yet. But I think I want to add some more people into the house. Just make sure that my party is kind of swinging. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this number right here. And we always take that number. And then we're always going to split it in half. And then we're always going to square it. Okay, so 6 split in half is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to add a 9 into that mix. And that's actually great because that creates a simple trinomial that I can actually break up into identical brackets, and then we'll eventually be able to write it squared. Okay, so that's like my game plan. But the thing is, you can't just add a 9 out of nowhere. Like, where'd that 9 come from? Already, this line does not look like the line above. You added a number out of nowhere, and you can't do that. So we also subtract a 9. That's kind of like you added 0, which means that they're not actually there, and therefore I didn't do anything to upset any math gods. Okay? So we'll just say we added a set of twins into our party mix. And the one that we're really interested in is the good twin, which I'm going to say is this one. We don't really want the evil twin, okay? And so we're just going to kick that evil twin out and just put them into the backyard. Okay, and so here's my party again. Y equals x squared plus 6x. I want the good twin. Close the house. The evil twin is going to go into the backyard. Okay, and that's where the 5 is right now. I told you it was a weird scenario that I come up with, but it helps me to remember. So if it helps you, great. Okay, let's start factoring now. So two numbers that multiply to 9, add to 6 are going to be 3 and 3. Make sure that they're identical because my next step is going to be to write it like this. That's what vertex form looks like. Now actually vertex form looks like this, where I have y equals a, x minus h squared, and I have a plus k, which is the backyard person. Oh, that means that I need to make sure I do something with those two. -9 plus 5 is going to be -4, and so just carry that -4 down into your answer, and we're finished. Okay, whoops. Okay, so this is vertex form. In fact, you can probably see the vertex already. That's going to be -3, opposite of what's inside the bracket, and -4. So that is your vertex right there. Something that I couldn't see from the original question. All right, so that's pretty much completing the square, all of those steps. Let's try that again, but I think I'm going to make it harder by making a complex trinomial question. So notice that there's a -1 in front of the x squared. That actually changes up some things. So do what you were doing before. Highlight just the x's and put the party house around them. Okay, additional step. If there's a number in front of the x squared, make sure that you kick it out. And so when I say kick it out, I mean take it out as a common factor. So -1 is going to be outside of the brackets. Common factor means that you're going to divide each of the things in the brackets by the -1. Don't take an x out. I know they can both be divided by x, but we actually really need your bracket to start with an x squared. So you can't take the x out. I really need that x squared to be there. Okay, now the -2x divided by -1 is going to leave a positive 2x. So that's an additional step that we didn't have to do before. Okay, 8's in the backyard, y equals 2 is in the front. All right. Now, I don't normally write that orange -1. I hope you guys are okay if I just write y equals negative, and then I'll have my bracket. Okay, I have x squared plus 2x. I'm going to extend my house a bit because we're expecting the twins. And how do we create that number for them? Take the 2. Okay, whoops. Always split it in half and then square it. Okay, so 2 split in half is 1, squared is 1. So my twins are going to be a good twin and an evil twin. Which one do we not want? Well, we really like the good twin. The evil twin we're just going to kick into the backyard. Okay, so let me write that again. Y equals negative x squared plus 2x plus 1. Those are the ones who are inside the house. That evil twin that I'm kicking out, be very careful. It's almost like when it leaves, you need to make sure that you kind of high-five the person in the front, like you're leaving the house. You just got to say bye to the person that's in front of the door. Multiply those two together. So it's almost like, and let me write that down, the pink -1 times the black -1 in the front is going to give you a positive 1. That's a lot of door ringing. Sorry, I'm still at school. That is someone trying to get into the school. I'm ringing a doorbell. Anyways, okay, and then we have the plus 8. Okay, so let's just make sure that you understood that one more time. you're taking the -1 and multiplying it by this -1, and that's how you get this guy. Okay, so -1 times -1. All right, now let's start the factoring. Y equals negative. Factor that into two identical brackets. Two numbers that multiply to 1 add to 2 are going to be +1 and +1. And add the two numbers at the back. Y is going to be -x plus 1, squared, plus 9. And we're finished. Okay, so obviously that one was a little bit trickier because of the extra number in the very front. Let's do another one just like that. Okay, steps again. Let's make sure that we highlight only the x values. Put your house around the two x values, like that. Okay, if there is a number that you can factor out so that you get x squared by itself in the front, factor it out. But that means you have to divide both of these by that 2. So you're going to get a 2. And on the inside, if you divide both the 2x squared and the 12x by 2, you're going to get x squared plus 6x. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to just extend that bracket a little bit, open up the house a bit, because we're expecting more visitors. All right, and to calculate that, you're going to take your 6. You always split it in half. It doesn't matter if it's a -6, by the way. You'll always get the same answer. So if you split it in half and then you put brackets around it and square it, your answer should always be a positive. So that's going to be 9. And remember that that's the one we want. We just don't want to all of a sudden add a 9 out of nowhere. You have to subtract the 9 as well. Okay. Now the +9 is the one that we want. We're going to kick the one we don't want out into the backyard. Okay, so 2x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then when you kick that -9 out, remember to multiply by whatever the number is in the front. So that -9 is actually going to become a -18. -9 times 2 is 18. I know there is a lot of steps to this completing the square process. Okay, y equals 2. Divide it up into identical houses. Put together the two numbers in the backyard, and then rewrite it in the form of a vertex form. Okay, and that's pretty much it. I'm just going to show you once again the 4th question so you can go through it just by yourself. But why don't we take, say, our answers for number 2 and number 4, and I'll just show you that we can actually graph things now. So A is using, A on this side, okay, is using number 2, I believe, and B is using number 4. And so when it's in the vertex form, we can actually start to use the transformation tables, so mapping notation, in order to graph. And we've done this before, and I'm just going to just project this. I'm not really going to go through it too much, other than notice that your black numbers are your original parabola numbers. And from there, you're going to transform. Let me zoom into this, and then I'll zoom in and you guys can take a look at the other one by yourself. That whatever is inside the bracket, this +1, you're going to do the opposite, and you're going to do it to all of the x's. Okay, now whatever is outside of that house, so that negative and the +9, the +9 is in the backyard, and so that goes behind your y values. That negative is in the front of the house, and so that goes in front of the y's. Calculate all of your new x and y values, and then you're just going to graph it, and that should be your new parabola with the transformations. Okay, so I did the same on the other side. You can pause the video and check it out yourself. From there, we should be able to tell a lot of things. Okay, and we can fill out this table that has to do with all of the characteristics of features of these parabolas, okay, or these quadratic functions. So one more time, going from standard form to vertex form, we did on the previous page. This is called completing the square. Once it's there, I should be able to see the vertex very easily. All right, and if it's in the vertex, I can also see that this right here is the axis of symmetry, and we always started with x equals 2 and then that number. Because I already graphed it, I can tell that it is opening down, but I can also tell because the a value is negative, okay, which means there's a reflection. From the graph above, I can also tell that it is a max. All right, so let's take a look. Yeah, it's a maximum, and the height is going to be at 9. All right, so it's going to be a max of 9. And if I wanted to find the x-intercepts, now I know how to factor and solve. And so you can put it into factored form by just factoring. Set it equal to 0, and then solve for each of your x-intercepts. Okay, so I got -4 and 2. So if you notice going back up, there is an x-intercept at -4 and 1 at 2. And lastly, the y-intercept. You can either plug in a 0 into your x and solve for your y, or like I said before, if you actually have it in standard form already, so just sorry, one more time, your answer is 8. If you have it in standard form, it is the last number, your c value. And so if I look at my diagram, there it is, my y-intercept at 8. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out so that you can see the other one if you'd like to take a look and go through it. And that's it for this lesson. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, just post it in the comments below.